dumb, so dumb, so.
Oh my goodness, oh my damn, oh my goodness, they're going ham. Oh my goodness, oh my damn, oh my goodness, they're going ham. Damn, 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 let's do this. Damn, damn, damn.
I am the stone that the builder refused. I am the visual, the inspiration that made ladies sing the blues. I'm the spark that makes your idea bright, the same spark that lights the dark so that you can know your left from your right. I am the ballad in your box, the bullet in the gun, the inner glow that let you know to call your brother son. The story that just begun, the promise of what's to come, and I'ma remain a soldier till the war is won. Chop, chop, chop. Flip. Chop, chop, chop. Flip. Chop, chop, chop. Chop, chop, chop.
What you talking about? What you talking about? What you talking about? What you talking about, Willis?
North American accounts of the giant skeletons that were found in the Ohio and Pennsylvania Valley. I'm talking everything from 10 to 12-foot tall guys found in copper armor. And the more I investigated, I found out it was a worldwide situation where we're talking some really big skeletons, all the way up to 36 feet tall.
If we only had basketball then, huh?
Well, I can tell you this, when some of these guys, some of the British giants, for instance, one guy specifically, listen to this, a guy by the name of William Joyce in the late 1800s, he could lift a ton dead weight, in other words, 2,000 pounds. And that you're only talking about a guy that was 8 feet tall. So I think the situation that most people find in history is there are too many question marks. And when you're looking at the temples of the world, and you're looking at all of the, what would you say, the answers that are out there, but seemingly are, swept under the rug, I think it becomes apparent that for some reason, someone doesn't want the issue of giants brought up.
How tall do you think the little guy is in the middle on your cover of your book, Genesis 6?
According to they claim he's right at 6 feet. When I got that from a group of people in London that have the only photos of these guys around. Also in the book, I have a picture of a 12'2" Irish mummy. And it's fascinating because, later in the show we can get into the mummy issue, but the point that's fascinating is if you take guys that are all the way up to 36 feet tall, 20 feet tall, the Emperor of China had two 15-foot guards. Charlemagne himself was surrounded by rather large individuals. We have a Roman emperor named Maximinius who was a giant himself. His wife's bracelet, George, would fit around his thumb. We're talking about people that are, we're talking about people with big egos, big appetites, and incredible strength. We're not talking about the medical situation that you see sometimes on the History Channel where they show giants as being these guys that don't live very long, obviously like Andre the Giant, who was a wrestler. Right. We're talking about guys with unbelievable strength, unbelievable knowledge, and unbelievable wisdom. On the website, I even show some of the Incan kings, I-N-C-A-N, Inca, from the Inca Empire, basically in the museums of Peru, that have 4 to 5 times the cranial mass of a standard human skull. So we're not only talking about big guys, we're talking about people with incredible intelligence, and we're talking about an answer that obviously classical anthropology and archaeology, these guys don't want to deal with this. I think it was David Hatcher Childress that coined the word Smithsonian Gate. In other words, a cover-up of history that's rather pronounced. And when you begin to dig, as I began digging over 30 years ago, you can find out that the reports of newspapers in America, of newspapers around the world. Interestingly enough, after I did the last show with Art, somebody went on the website and they sent me from Eastern Europe, they've already sponsored I guess you'd say an undertaking to go into some of the caves where they found a whole, basically, cavern of giant skeletons. And in the New Ancient American, which is a magazine that's put out in America, they found the most contemporary find. It's someplace in Desert Southwest, and it actually shows the pictures of the giants, shows the cave, etc. So basically, interestingly enough, too, is that when you look at this, you see that there is a very, very, how should I say, skittish archaeological base out there that doesn't even want to deal with this.
Do you want to see how they keep everyone in the dark with this whole Smithsonian Nephilim giant human skeleton topic? Well, let me show you how they do it. And this article is a perfect example on this website, World News Daily Report. Now, this article is actually fake and is talking about fake things intentionally to throw people off. Obviously, they're hoping truthers will latch onto this article and make videos. And there's actually people that have done it and actually made massive videos, like this guy here, 147,000 subscribers. Of course, he doesn't know what's really, going on here. But let me just show you kind of what they're doing. Okay, if you check at the bottom of this article, way at the bottom, you'll see two things that really give it away. You see, nobody's buying, and even worse, far worse, is right at the bottom of the page entirely. New World Order Media. Okay, now this website is a Zionist website created by some people in Israel claiming to be Christians, Muslims, and Jews working together in this website. Alleged news source, but actually, if you look at their About Us page, they even say that this is for entertainment purposes only. American Jewish Zionist newspaper. We're based in Tel Aviv, 1988. And let's see here. Yeah, here we go, down here. World News Daily Report assumes all responsibility for the satirical nature of this article, for the fictional nature of its content. All characters appearing in these articles on this website, even those based on real people, are entirely fictional. Any resemblance between them and any person, living or dead, is purely a miracle. So this is clearly a mock towards truthers. This whole entire website is a mock. They're expecting you to pick up on their articles. They're expecting you to just eat this up and then go report it and then it discredits you. That's kind of the idea of what they're doing here. And of course, they work off directly off Snopes. Snopes literally uses these websites all the time. They just literally pick up articles off these websites they know are satirical, fictional, which is intentional. They're literally trying to mislead people. And Snopes basically just uses these articles to debunk, when it doesn't even take a rocket scientist to debunk it, because it tells you it's fake. On their About Us page, it tells you they're New World Order Media at the bottom of their page, and they tell you that it's fictional in nature. So they tell you up front, this is all fake. So is Snopes really doing anything for us? No, other than COINTELPRO. They're actually part of it. So they're doing it on purpose to discredit truthers, to discredit anybody trying to seek the truth on topics like this. Now, of course, it actually is true. The Smithsonian have destroyed thousands of giant human skeletons. This is the whole point. They take something that's actual truth, they have someone falsely report it, making up fictional information, then these guys debunk it, all to basically throw everybody off and say, oh, it's just a bunch of bull crap. In reality, they never did this. That's the entire point of this whole thing. So this is very interesting. I wanted to point this out to you guys so you could see kind of how they work. It's really kind of retarded, but everybody falls for this stuff. Obviously, those who follow secular archaeology think, oh, look, see, this proves it. This debunks it, that it's all bullcrap. See, look, Snopes already debunked it. So that's the whole point of why they do this. I went through this video, and some of the things that were very interesting were when he was reading historical accounts from various people in the 1600s. They went to Peru. you know, when they conquered the Incas, okay, when the conquistadors went in and conquered the Incas, the Inca, I don't know, dynasty, whatever you want to call it, they went in, obviously they conquered them with the sword and also with disease, because they brought diseases that killed them off. But what's interesting is if you look into their writings from various, you know, Jesuit, Dominican clerics and Jesuit monks, and just Anglican, or not Anglican, Augustinian monks, and they were not just monks. Some of these people were also just scientists that were, you know, commissioned by the church as well, and historians that were commissioned by the church. And there's several writings they cite in this movie, where it clearly indicates that there were giants. And here's the interesting part. Here is the interesting part about all this. The history books that you read when you were in high school, when you were in middle school, were written by historians who read from these historical works, various historical works, and they just picked and chose what they wanted to present. So they read something like this here. Reginaldo, I don't know how to pronounce this, Dominican cleric and chronicler, a brief description of the land of Peru, 1595. Here we go. There were once giants here, and natives say they don't know from hence they came. Their houses were 3 leagues below the anchorage, made of 2 gables with very large beams. Now, actually what they're showing in the scene here was quoted, I think, a little bit later on, but what they were is actually 30-foot tall giants that were basically rotting, that they found in around the 1600s when they conquered the Incas. Rotting corpses of giants that were 30 foot tall that they ended up burning and incinerating, just destroying them, because they were used as idol worship in a cave. So this is in a cave, the setting is a cave, and they were doing human sacrifice unto these dead gods. Obviously not gods, but they considered them gods. 30-foot tall giants, hundreds of human bodies sacrificed to them. Okay, this is what they encountered in a certain village in Peru. So some crazy stuff, obviously. But I'm not going to play this video, obviously, because I'm just trying to give you a little bit of review of this video, just show you a couple little stills from the video, and encourage you to go buy it because it's really spectacular. I mean, I haven't seen the whole thing, but it's really nice. It's only $9.95, and actually you can rent it for $4.95. You can pay $5 and watch this whole thing, but I paid so I could have it basically, like it says here, you own this or whatever you want to call it, but which means I can just play it whenever I want to. Added to this are known traditions that all these giants, whose bones are still seen until this day in this beautiful place, died in the flames because of young, handsome men. These Indians did not know how to... Oh yeah, I wanted to tell you about the scene. I'm not going to tell you everything, obviously. I'm just going to tell you a few things from this video. This is really spectacular. This is just so spectacular. Okay, this is from an Augustinian monk, anthropologist. He wrote it in the Moral Chronicle of the Order of St. Augustine of Peru, 1663. Okay, so what this guy is doing is he's retelling what these, do they call them Peruvians? These people who lived in Peru, I guess they were part of the Incas, or whatever, however you want to call them, Incas, Peruvians, I don't know what you call it, Indians. Okay, we'll just call them Indians here. These Indians from that region have a story that was passed down to them about giants. Some of the antediluvian giants, from what I understand, that came to the land and basically took over. They're about 15 foot tall. They took over and they were killing off some of the people and basically controlling the land. They had basically control of the land, sort of like overlords, I guess you would say. And what they would do is these giants that came, some of them were naked, some of them weren't. Okay, they came in these reed-formed ships. They somehow made ships out of reed. And when they came over, they had no women. It was just all male Nephilim giant offspring. And what they would do is they would steal the women from the Indians and basically rape them and try to impregnate them, and actually would kill them in the process often. From what I understand, it basically they mostly all died, because you're talking about a 15-foot giant raping a 5-foot tall woman. Obviously, it's not going to work out in any way, shape, or form. It's just crazy. So these evil beings, what they ended up doing is they would have gay sex out in the open and do other crazy stuff, obviously. And they were very evil. They were killing all these women. They were also fighting the people of the land and doing other types of abominable acts. But what ended up happening, and this is what's being said here, a young, handsome man in the sky took out a sword and threw a lightning bolt down on these giant Nephilim offspring and killed them, incinerated them. So what we're talking about here is likely an angel of God. You know, usually angels of God are considered to be very handsome looking men, you know, with a sword, basically threw a lightning bolt at them and destroyed them all. And this is the story. And this is not from the Bible. This isn't from the Book of Enoch or Book of Jubilees. This is a story from Indians in Peru. It sounds exactly like something. It sounds kind of like a mix between Sodom and Gomorrah's judgment and, sort of like what you see in the Book of Enoch. It's just, it sounds like it really correlates. And all these myths, as they call them myths, correlate so well with these stories, these ancient stories from the Book of Enoch, Jasher, and Jubilees, which also mysteriously were buried. So we have the Catholic Church, Rome, the Vatican, burying the Book of Enoch, which was rediscovered in Africa in, I think, 1780s or so. We have the Book of Jasher and Jubilees, which also was, essentially kicked out as being pseudepigraphical, or basically erroneous, falsely ascribed texts. These books are critical to understanding Genesis 6, right? But the church got rid of these books. The church, we're talking Rome here, gets rid of all these giant skeleton bones. This church, right? Who are they really serving? And now they're talking about some aliens coming to be a part of society, and that aliens could get saved. We know that this Vatican is working with the Nephilim. It sounds to me that's what they're doing behind the scenes. It's pretty obvious to me.
We are the giants.
Giants, the children of the Nephilim.
The Nephilim. Eliud.
The children of the Nephilim.
Giants.
The seed of the fallen angels.
Seed of the fallen angels.
Nephilim.
The story of the fallen angels begin in Genesis 6, 1-4.
And it came to pass, when men began to multiply on the face of the earth, and daughters were born unto them, that the sons of God saw the daughters of men, that they were fair, and they took them wives of all which they chose. And God said, My spirit shall not always strive with man, for that he also is flesh, yet his days shall be 120 years. There were giants in the earth in those days, and also after that, when the sons of God came in unto the daughters of men, and they bare children to them. The same became mighty men which were of old, men of renown. And God saw that the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and that every imagination of his thoughts of his heart was only evil continually.
The sons of God saw beauty of the daughters of men, and desired them as wives.
Oh, how beautiful they are. The daughters of men. Come, let us go down unto them and take them as wives. And our seed will be mingled with theirs.
Yes.
Many people think that the term sons of God does not mean that they were angels. But if you read Job 1:6, you'll see that this is exactly what they are, angels. Job 1:6. Now there was a day when the sons of God came to present themselves before Yahuwah, and Satan came also among them. Also in Job 38:6-7. It states how the sons of God shouted for joy before man was even created. The sons of God are angels.
Whereupon are the foundations thereof fastened? Or who laid the cornerstone thereof, when the morning stars sang together, and all the sons of God shouted for joy?
The book of Enoch makes it clear that this is exactly what happened. The book of Enoch 7:2. And when the watchers, angels, the sons of heaven, beheld them, they became enamored with them, saying to each other, Come, let us select for ourselves wives of the progeny of men, and let us beget children.
Many people do not accept the book of Enoch, but it has hard facts proving that the angels took wives. The King James Version, on the other hand, isn't that clear. But the book of Enoch makes it very clear. This may be why the book of Enoch was not added to the Bible, and why so many are so skeptical about the book. Modern scholars estimate the older sections, mainly the Book of the Watchers, is dated at about 300 BC. And the latest part, the Book of the Parables, is probably dated around the 1st century BC. Discoveries of copies of the book among the Dead Sea Scrolls found at Qumran proves that the book was in existence before the birth of the Messiah, and it had a great influence on the early Messianic believers. Why is this important? Well, many of the sayings of the Messiah was derived from the book of Enoch.
Over 100 phrases in the New Testament find precedence in the book of Enoch. Here are a few of them. John 4:14. But the water that I shall give him shall be in him a well of water springing up into everlasting life. The book of Enoch 48:1. In that place I beheld a fountain of righteousness which never failed. The term children of light in the Bible may have come from the book of Enoch 105:25. And now I will call the spirits of the good from the generation of light, and will change those who have been born in darkness. Matthew 22:30. For the resurrection they neither marry nor are given in marriage, but are as the angels of God in heaven. The Book of Enoch 50:4. And all the righteous shall become like angels in heaven. When the Messiah said in Luke 6:24, But woe unto you that are rich. It is a direct quote from the Book of Enoch 93:1. Woe to you who are rich. Terms like Son of Man, Lord of Lords, King of Kings, all were found in the Book of Enoch. This pretty much validates the book, since both the Messiah and his apostles quote from it. According to the Book of Enoch, 200 angels descended upon Ardis, which is the top of Mount Armon today, known as Mount Hermon, which is located on the border between Lebanon and Syria. The Book of Enoch 7:7. Then they swore all together, and all bound themselves by mutual execrations. Their whole number was 200, who descended upon Ardis, which is the top of Mount Armon. The Book of Enoch 7:10-15. Then they took wives, each choosing for himself, whom they began to approach, and with whom they cohabitated, teaching them sorcery, incantations, and the dividing of roots and trees. And the woman conceiving brought forth giants, whose stature was each 300 cubits. These devoured all which the labor of men produced, until it became impossible to feed them, when they turned themselves against men, in order to devour them, and began to injure birds, beasts, reptiles, and fishes, to eat their flesh one after another, and to drink their blood. Then the earth reproved the unrighteous. The Hebrew word for giant is Nephil, from Nephal, properly a feller, example, a bully or tyrant. Giant. There are three races that came forth from the fallen angels: the giants, which are the Nephilim, the Nephil, which are the children of the giants, and the Eliud, or Eljo, which are the children of the Nephil. Jubilees 7:21-22. For owing to these three things came the flood upon the earth, namely, owing to the fornication wherein the watchers, against the law of their ordinances, went a-whoring after the daughters of men, and took themselves wives of all which they chose. And they made the beginning of uncleanliness. And they begat sons, the Nephilim. And they were all unlike, and they devoured one another. And the giants slew the Nephil, and the Nephil slew the Eljo, and the Eljo mankind, and one man another. 2 Peter 2:4-5. For if Elohim spared not the angels that sinned, but cast them down to hell, and delivered them into chains of darkness, to be reserved unto judgment, and spared not the old world, but saved Noah the 8th person, a preacher of righteousness, bringing in the flood upon the world of the ungodly.
And the angels which kept not their first estate, but left their own habitation, he hath reserved in everlasting chains under darkness unto the judgment of the great day.
Most people believe that the giants were all destroyed in the flood, and that the fallen angels were all bound in everlasting chains. This is true as it relates to the first fallen angels and giants. But we must keep in mind that there were giants after the flood that dwelt in the land of Canaan. Where did these new race of giants come from? If the first giants came of fallen angels, and the original fallen angels were bound unto judgment, we can only conclude that they must have come from a new generation of fallen angels. They continue to come down and take the daughters of men as wives and bear children unto them. This is why Paul warned us of this thing, of angels coming down and talking to us.
Galatians 1:6-8. I marvel that ye are so soon removed from him that called you into the favor of the Messiah unto another good message, which is not another, but there be some that trouble you, and would pervert the good message of the Messiah. But though we, or an angel from heaven, preach any other message unto you than that which we have preached unto you, let him be accursed.
Be not forgetful to entertain strangers, for thereby some have entertained angels unawares.
Did you hear that? I find it amazing that Paul said that an angel can come and give you a message contrary to that which the Ruach HaKodesh, the set-apart spirit, had given. You mean to tell me that some of us has entertained angels and wasn't aware of it? That means not knowing that they were angels. They took on the form of flesh and blood, and some took on this form in order to take human wives. This is why we see giants after the time of the flood. The land of Canaan was filled with them. The scriptures give account that there were many giants throughout the land of Canaan after the flood. Where did they come from?
And there we saw the giants, the sons of Enoch, which come of the giants, and we were in our own sight as grasshoppers, and so we were in their sight. The Emims dwelt therein in times past, a people great and many, and tall as the Anakims, which also were accounted giants as the Anakims, but the Moabites call them Emims. For only Og king of Bashan remained of the remnant of giants. Behold, his bedstead was a bedstead of iron. Is it not in Rabbath of the children of Ammon? 9 cubits was the length thereof, and 4 cubits the breadth of it after the cubit of a man.
The Book of Enoch 7:11-12. And the women conceiving brought forth giants, whose stature was each 300 cubits. These devoured all which the labor of men produced, until it became impossible to feed them. Most Christians try to discredit the Book of Enoch based on the passage that says the giants were 300 cubits tall, which makes the giants around 450 feet. That's pretty incredible, and seems to be questionable. The scribes and translators must have made an error, and the actual text could have read 30 cubits instead of 300. Making the giants about 45 feet tall, which is in accordance to some of the remains being found.
I find it strange that Christians are willing to discredit the Book of Enoch based on a couple of errors, but the King James Version has hundreds of such errors, not to mention Christianity itself is full of errors.
The Book of Enoch, it's one of those that's accepted by some and rejected by others. It is a very controversial book because it raises a lot of questions about the identity of certain racial groups, and it brings greater understanding to many of the mystical things that are greatly misunderstood today. You have the question of the giants, the spirits that roam the earth, the elements of end-time prophecy, and so much more that are very difficult to simply just dismiss because there's just too much starting to make sense as certain events unfold.
We know for a fact that there were giants in the land of Canaan after the flood. Where did they come from? The book of Enoch and the book of the giants give very good information about the giants and the fallen angels they sprung for and who their descendants are.
The Book of Giants is an apocrypha Hebrew book expanding a narrative in the Bible. Its discovery at Qumran dates the text's creation to before the 2nd century BC. The Book of Giants is thought to have been based on the Book of Enoch, a pseudepigraphical Hebraic work from the 3rd century BC, itself based on Genesis 6, 1-4, concerning the Nephilim, which, in the Enoch version, are the offspring of fallen angels. Aramaic fragments, along with other fragments from the Book of Enoch, were found among the Dead Sea Scrolls at Qumran. The text relates how some giants, named Oya, Ahaya, and Mahwe, sons of the fallen angels, have some dreams that foresee the biblical flood. The Book of Giants, Fragment J, verses 27. Thereupon the giants began to kill each other and to abduct their wives. The creatures too began to kill each other. They chose beautiful women and demanded them in marriage. So did all carried off severally. They were subjected to tasks and services. And they from each city, and were ordered to serve the Messenians of Messenia, which was a region of Greece.
The first Messenian War was a war between Messenia and Sparta. It took place around 754 BC. In 480 BC, Leonidas, Sparta, sacrifices 300 Spartan soldiers at the Battle of Thermopylae so the main forces can escape the Persians. This is where we get the movie 300 from. Of course, they made a lot of changes to the original story. Now, why is this so important? These early nations were all descendants of fallen angels, which the Nephilim sprang forth from.
Most authors have not taken into account that this Nephilim and their children the Eliud could reproduce. This explains some of the strangeness of ancient mythology. Moreover, perhaps were humanoids, such as the Neanderthals came from, and why they are not of the same DNA branch as modern humans out of Africa. However, Neanderthals were not the only hominin species that humans mated with. According to a new study, East Asian and European populations share genes with the Neanderthal. Also, East Asians share genes with the mysterious archaic hominin species that lived in Siberia, the Denisovians, that are close cousin to the Neanderthal.
This is the Egyptian queen Nefertiti, right? That's not just a pretty wild hat she's wearing. She's covering up a pretty big dome of a head. She's got one heck of a cone head going on there. She's got a real big cone head. Assuming this is an accurate likeness of the queen, the picture to the left shows a profile of Nefertiti, revealing just how incredibly large and elongated her head was. Was she born that way? Were her daughters born that way too? Here's a representation of one of her daughters. We see, you see the Akhenaten on the left there holding one of his kids, and Nefertiti on the right with two of her daughters. The little baby up on her shoulder has an elongated head. Now, some people think that's just people strapping boards to their heads and stretching out their skull. Well, first of all, that's a baby right there with the skull like that. But I'm going to suggest that, yes, there are people in the world who do strap boards to their head to change the shape of their skull. But the reason why they're doing that is because they're emulating something they saw somewhere else in the distance that was distant past that was naturally that way. Like this, like this girl right here. She was naturally that way. Okay? This skull, the person who gave it to me is a friend of mine. His name is Jeff Randall. He called me up one day after doing a Google search. We hadn't seen each other or talked to each other in 5 years. He moved from Texas to New York. He's doing a Google search one day on Nephilim and sees my stuff all over the place on YouTube and everything. He's like, what in the world? I didn't know you were into this. So he contacts me out of the blue. He says, when did you get into this stuff? I said, well, I've kind of always been into it. He says, well, we got to talk. He says, I'm coming back to Dallas for a short trip. We need to hook up. So we go out to dinner, and he gives me this. He says, maybe this will help you with your research. I'm like, yeah, dude. That's a great prop, huh? He said that the woman who gave it to him had access to the original skull in Peru. This is from Peru. This is a replica of the skull in Peru. It has a completely different suture pattern on the top of its head. We have a frontal lobe right here, and then we have the two parietal lobes. This doesn't have that. It's a completely different suture pattern. Strapping boards to your head is not going to change the suture pattern. This is somebody that was born that way. This is a female skull, and you see the difference between the female skull and the more robust male skulls there. This is a artist representation of what this person may have looked like in real life. Could that have been what the wives of Noah's 3 sons looked like? Could be. These people got their genetic traits somehow passed down to them. The Egyptians were the offspring of Mitzrayim, who was an offspring of Ham. So it's possible. It shows the superimposed skull of a normal person, so you see the size of the brain, how much different it is right there. What other abilities did these people have, with a brain like that? Who knows what kind of abilities they might have had. We also see news reports coming out. This is from December. An article came out December 18th, updated on the 19th. It says the headline was, "The incredible alien skull discovered in a Mexican cemetery, a 1,000-year-old skeleton. Archaeologists in Mexico today revealed the astonishing skull of a person suffering from a cranial disfiguration." That's what it is. So, the question was, were they born this way, or was it strapping boards on their heads? Well, to answer that question, some people certainly were born this way. In this book right here, The Enigma of Cranial Deformation, you see they actually have the skull that I have right here on the front cover. David Hatcher Childress and Brian Forster wrote this book. I've actually been in contact with Brian Forster. They are doing DNA tests on these skulls. They were raising money to try to answer the question, who or what are these creatures? And they were raising money to do DNA testing, and I contributed financially towards the research. So he's been emailing me almost weekly updates on that. So they've done some preliminary tests just to make sure the DNA has not been contaminated with other people's DNA, and they've ruled that out. So that's a good sign, and so now we're eagerly anticipating the results, what they come up with. But in their book, they talk about how this individual that's quoted here discovered a mummy of a pregnant woman that had a 7-month-old fetus inside with a skull like that. So that pretty much rules out the headboard strapping thing right there. If you got a 7-month-old fetus inside a mummy of a pregnant woman, yeah, they were born that way. And here's the first Home Alone creature. Oh no! I've got a cone head! So, what did the female Nephilim that got on the ark look like? I don't know. Did they look like this? The early X-Men, right? Were they just people with extraordinary powers and maybe no disfiguration at all? Could they have looked like this? I do find it interesting that this individual right here just so happens to have 6 toes. I don't know. A lot of people argue with me about this and say, Rob, that's absurd. Why would God allow Nephilim seed on the ark? I said, well, your argument's actually more absurd than mine, because I'm dealing with the root cause. You're dealing with the symptom, right? I'm saying the root cause was taken care of by God. You're saying God allowed them to just continue doing what they did before the flood, after the flood. If God wiped out the whole world because of what the Nephilim watchers did with mating with women, what was it, just a halftime show where God was cleaning off the playing field, and after it was over, okay, guys, pick up where you left off. Come on, mate with the women again. No, I believe God allowed it for his own sovereign purposes to show himself to be the God of gods, Lord of lords, King of kings, right? And he got victory through his people. We're studying the book of Exodus right now. We see over and over and over again how the surrounding nations were in absolute terror of the Israelites because of their God. And that was God's purpose, was to make himself great, make himself known, and to do so through his chosen people. We see that in Exodus. We see it in Joshua chapter 2 when the spies go into Jericho and they meet the Rahab, and she says, we're all in terror. We know all about you guys, what you guys did to Og Bashan and what you did to the Egyptians. See what God was doing? He allowed Nephilim seed to go through the ark so that he can make his people revered and known throughout all the world as the people of God, who they were. And actually, what I discovered doing, anybody ever heard of a Punnett square in school, doing Punnett squares? I thought, what would it be like if I did a Nephilim Punnett square? And I thought, okay, women have two X chromosomes and men have an X and a Y. And if we're talking about a 50-50 hybrid, then let's say that the woman, the suspicious women as I call them, may have had one tainted X chromosome and one good one. Well, you see that when you mate with a normal male, you have a 50-50 chance of producing completely normal offspring. And I see that that's what happened in the case of Shem's offspring, for instance. I can't find any evidence of Nephilim in Shem's offspring.
This is your boy Elder Willis. Look real close. Not the Negroes. We are not from the seed of Ham.
I see a lot of evidence in Ham, and I see some evidence in Japheth. So clearly the odds worked in different ways. And can God affect the odds? Sure he can. Anybody hear the stories of what happened after Christ in the 40 years leading up to the destruction of the temple? Things like they cast lots for Azazel. In Leviticus, it talks about when the lot comes up for Jehovah or when it comes up for Azazel, what they do with the scapegoat and whatnot. Well, for 40 years, every year it came up in the same hand for Azazel. Now, what are the statistical odds that that would happen every year exactly the same way for 40 years? Clearly, God can mess with the odds if he wants to. So it appears to have an issue to do with obedience. You know, the sins of the father are passed down to the fourth generation. Obviously, that's genetic. Something's going on there. So God can affect things. I believe that the odds were affected positively for Shem. They were kind of off and on for Japheth, and definitely negatively in Ham's offspring. But not all of Ham's offspring were Nephilim either, when you go through the scriptures. So I think that this bears that out. Whereas if you believe in multiple incursions, you've got a much bigger problem because you have an X and Y chromosome that's bad, and the odds get significantly worse. So if you subscribe to multiple incursions, you're talking about polluting the gene pool significantly worse than I am by introducing potent fallen angel genetics into the genome. And speaking of genetics, I want to go back to the animal-human hybrid thing for a minute here and talk about the post-flood accounts of chimera, animal-human hybrids, because we definitely see evidence of that. In the black obelisk of Shalmaneser III in 2 Kings, he's mentioned in chapter 17, we see this individual, Shalmaneser III. This black obelisk depicts a full-grown elephant. Note the size of its tusk. Okay, that's a full-grown elephant right there. Behind it is what looks to be a full-grown lion, except that the interesting thing about this lion is it has human hands and a human head. Could that be the lion men of Moab that we read about in 2 Samuel 23:20? Again, what if we just take the scriptures literally and look at the available evidence? And by the way, look at the size of the individuals holding the leash of the lion men. If that's a full-grown elephant, there's some pretty big dudes there walking their pet lion men. This is a Hittite carving right here of another lion-men hybrid type with eagle wings, a lion head, a human head, and a serpent tail. The Hittites, their name means the terrors. Here's another representation of artwork done by the Hittites showing satyrs, satyr-like creatures with a different variety of lion men, human bodies with lion heads. You know what's interesting when you start looking at stuff like this and you look into the Hebrew of Scripture is you see some pretty wild stuff like when Sarah died and Abraham was negotiating for a burial plot to bury his wife. It says in multiple places that Abraham dealt with an individual named Ephron who dwelt among the Hittites. Well, the Hittites means the terrors. The Hittites are making depictions like this, and Ephron's name means fawn-like. So could it be that Abraham was negotiating with a satyr for a burial plot for his wife? Could be. There certainly is substantial evidence that would point in that direction if we take it literally. Here's some other depictions here. The Persian Greek griffin or the charioteer of Delphi on the right. The centaurs and minotaurs and satyrs and stuff of Greek mythology, of course. Then you have this creature right here. This is a sculpture, the ancient Etruscan Roman bronze sculpture of a chimera, known as the Chimera of Arezzo. It's one of the best known examples of the art of the Etruscans. So yeah, there was definitely animal-human hybrids before and after the flood. Now, I want to differentiate the days of Noah from the days of Jared. It was in the days of Noah that Jesus said the last days would be like those days. The days of Jared were marked by the mating of angels and humans. However, it was in the days of Noah that the creation of animal-human hybrids brought about the corruption of all flesh we read about in Genesis 6:12, which ultimately led to God's judgment and the flood. If we were to take Jesus' words literally in Matthew 24:37, all we need to do is turn on the evening news. There we are seeing the repeat not of angels mating with humans as in the days of Jared, but rather the recreation of animal-human hybrids exactly as it was in the days of Noah. All of the post-flood giants can be traced directly back to the people in Genesis chapter 10, specifically verses 6 through 20. These are the ites that we read about in Scripture that the Israelites had to wipe out, utterly destroy. You know, it's kind of weird. God would say, when you go into that village, you can, kill the men, but you can keep the women and children and animals as spoils of war. But when you go over here, I want you to kill the women, kill the children, kill the animals, kill everything, utterly destroy everything. Now, either God is schizophrenic, prejudiced, and into random acts of genocide, or there's a reason why he did that. Well, it's because those were Nephilim villages in the post-flood world that God was having his people systematically wipe out. And they can be traced right back to these people right here, specifically the children of Ham. And you see, I got the definition, the meaning of their names right beside each one of them. I'm just going to take all of these names in the exact order that they're listed there and string them together in a paragraph and show you what it spells out. Taking those names, putting them together in a paragraph, this is what it says. He raged, a black terror, double straight, afflicted trafficker. Black terror, drink thou anguish. Compass the chamber, thunder, compass the smiting. He who is coming, their love, we shall rebel. A double straight firebrand, travailing, affliction of water, blades opening the moistened morsel. Forgiven ones bowing to spy. A trafficker hunting terrors, trodden down sayers. The strangers draw near. Showers of life, gnawing like thorns, they shall break loose. Double woolen enclosures of wrath. That's an interesting family. And they show up immediately after the flood. We see in Numbers 13:33 where they go into the land and they see the Nephilim there, right? And it says that these are Nephilim that come from other Nephilim. It doesn't say from fallen angels, so it's not a good argument for multiple incursions. And it says these are the Anakim, who are the sons of Anak. Well, Anak was a son of Arba, who was an Amorite, son of Amorius, who was a son of Canaan, son of Ham, who stepped off the ark. So you've got a direct line right to the boat from Numbers 13:33 backwards. And just to give you an idea, in Numbers 13, where they go in there to the land and they say, we felt like grasshoppers by comparison. Yeah, well, this is what Caleb was up against. All right? It helps you understand why the spies said what they said. You know, they were afraid. But who's bigger, God or the giants? Look at what Caleb says. But Caleb quieted the people before Moses and said, let us go up at once and occupy it, for we are well able to overcome it. The scripture says in Amos 2:9 that the Amorites got as tall as cedar trees. I'm just going to take the scripture literally. You know, sometimes the Bible talks in allegorical terms, in metaphor, uses symbols and whatnot, but when it does, usually an angel or somebody comes alongside the character and says, oh, by the way, this is what that weird creature represents. So when it speaks in allegorical terms, the Bible itself tells you what it's saying. And so I say, well, when it doesn't have that extra bit of narrative, we should just take it literally. And if you take the Bible literally, you see a lot of wild stuff. And so Amos 2:9 says they got as tall as cedar trees and strong as the oaks. That's not an exaggeration right there. And just to give you an idea of what a battle with a 35-footer would look like, I mentioned the movie Wrath of the Titans earlier. There's actually a scene in the movie where Perseus is going up against a 35-foot Cyclops. This is what a battle with a 35-footer might look like.
Bad idea.
You notice the giant screamed and he held his ears? Actually, Josephus talks about that they were terrible to the hearing. You know, and of course, just by their sheer size, you would imagine them being pretty loud. But there's an indication of what it might look like to